I believe it is 5:15. So if the chair would like to begin.
Thank you.
Ready?
This is the February 1st, 2022 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning. Present are Mr. Morrison, Mr. Jadon, Ms. Grass, Ms. Richards, Mr. Bennett. Present from the planning staff are Mr. Batchella, Ms. Ashby, and Mr. Valentine. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask those who speak to identify themselves for the record. We'll conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We'll first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who's in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We'll then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning has the authority to do three things. First, to hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Second, to grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And third, to grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. The first, there'll be three items stricken from the agenda tonight. First will be item B1, 10 Concord Street. That item has been deferred and will not be heard. Second item is item B2, Oak Bluff Avenue. That item has been withdrawn and it will not be heard. Third item is item B3, 125 Moultrie Street. That item is deferred and will not be heard. First item to be heard tonight on the agenda is item A1, the review of the minutes of the December 21st, 2021 board meeting. Members of the board should have been sent copies of these, and are there any comments or additions or deletions to those minutes? Hearing none, Mr. Morrison moves for approval, seconded by I beg your pardon, Mr. Morrison was absent from that meeting, so the motion is made for approval by Mr. Jadon and seconded by Ms. Grass. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Jadon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards was also absent. Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. Motion is unanimously approved. Second item on the agenda is A2, review of minutes of the January 18th, 2022 minutes. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions to those minutes as recorded? Hearing none, the motion for approval is made by Mr. Morrison, seconded by Ms. Richards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. Motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is B2. I beg your pardon, that one has been deferred. Flip the page. Item B4, 252 and 254 Cumming Street. Request a variance from section 54-317 to allow an existing restaurant at 252 Cumming Street to expand to 254 Cumming Street. Displays one on-site parking space and add 234 square feet of outdoor patron use area and 586 square feet of inside patron use area without providing 5 spaces for the added restaurant patron area. Added patron area requires 8 spaces. Property is grandfathered for 3 spaces, zone CT. Mr. Batchelder.
So this involves 2 properties, the corner property at Bogard and Cumming Street and a adjacent property to the north. The adjacent property to the north is actually shown here with the blue box around it, that house, that 2-story single house. And then to the right of that, you see the corner store on the corner of Cumming and Bogard Street. This zoning map shows that both the corner property and 254 Cumming Street to the north are zoned commercial transitional, a commercial zoning district that also permits residential uses as well, but is meant for neighborhood settings like this. And I should say that the corner store was rezoned to commercial transitional a few years back, and then the property to the north, 254 Cumming Street, which is really the subject of this request, that property was recently rezoned by City Council. And the applicant application was filed, is seeking the board's approval to allow the restaurant that exists in the corner building at Bogard and Cumming Street to expand into the 254 Cumming Street property. I have to say I wasn't a fan of the rezoning of the property because it was a viable residential property, but City Council did approve the rezoning to enable the owner of the corner property to expand into 254 Cumming Street. So it is what it is. And what they would like to do is convert this from a residential use into a restaurant use. And they would have some outdoor patron use areas you'll see in what was the driveway area of the property and a little bit further back. And then they would allow for the patron use area inside this building, all being provided without providing any off-street parking. And of course, they would be displacing one parking space as well. So the property to the right, where the existing restaurant is located, Chubby Fish. That doesn't change. So this is the 254 Street, Cumming Street property. You see the driveway that would be displaced from having parking space in it. And the reason for that is that they, in order to use the building for added patron use area, they have to build a ramp. And that ramp, these are existing first and second floor plans, but the ramp, as you can see in the view right here. So you see that ramp being located here in what would otherwise be the driveway. And then this identifies where the indoor and outdoor patron use area would be. Indoor, of course, here and here, and then you've got some outdoor patron use area on the porch. So that's essentially the request. The neighborhood association, as I understand it, is supportive of this request. I think Penny has talked to the neighborhood president, Marion Hawkins, and we recommend approval of this request. We feel it meets the variance requirements to allow this, and recommend approval of it to you.
City recommends approval. Is there any opposition to this application? Ms. Ashby, is there any opposition?
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Robinson. No, sir. There is no opposition to this application.
Ms. Grass moves for approval, seconded by Ms. Richards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Jadon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Item B5 on the agenda is 236 St. Margaret Street, Wagner Terrace. Request special exception under section 54-110 to allow a two-story addition, porch, living room, extension, garage, bedrooms, baths, laundry room, game room that extends a non-conforming 4.5-foot west side setback, a non-conforming 21-foot front setback, 9 feet and 25 feet required. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow and the garage, exterior stair storage, and outdoor shower addition with a 3-foot east side setback, 9 feet required. Zoned SR2. Mr. Batchelder.
So this is an application that came before the board back in December. And at that meeting, the board elected to defer the request and asked the applicant to reconsider their plans and possibly move the garage back further from the street. At that time, it was a detached garage that was being proposed on this lot. And you can see that this lot is a little bit wider than most of the lots in the neighborhood. And the other thing about it is that the existing residence sits on all the way over on the west side of the property. So that leaves this large setback or large side yard on the east side of the house. And that's where the garage was being added to this property. So this is just an aerial view showing that property mid-block on St. Margaret Street. Here's the zoning map. Again, you see very clearly how the house sits all the way over on the left side. So that leaves a very wide side yard that's unusual for Wagner Terrace. And applicant filed this application, their explanation for the request. Now they've changed the request from the approvals that would be necessary for a detached accessory building garage into a request for an addition to the side of the existing house. So here you have the site plan, another site plan showing the setback requirements with the red dashed lines from the side and in front. And this is what was proposed. I just wanted to throw this in here because I want you, just to help you refresh your memory on what was proposed and discussed at the December 21st meeting. This garage, you'll see, was lining up with the front of the house. And I think at that time, the board was concerned about the shallow setback for the accessory building from a street relative to what the ordinance required, and asked the applicant to consider moving the garage back. I think those were worthy, good comments. This is the new plan that the applicant has proposed. And I should also point out that the front porch was not on the original, the December site plan, because we failed to advertise it properly. So, but that was always part of the plan. And you see the front porch here on the site plan that's under consideration tonight. So that front porch requires your approval to extend the non-conforming side setback on this side. House sits 4.5 feet off the east side property line. 9 feet is required. So the extension of that non-conforming side setback to the front requires your approval. There's no issue with the setback from the street. Porches are allowed to encroach into, porches and stairs are allowed to encroach into a front setback. So that's not an issue. It's just the extension of the side setback over here, and that requires a special exception. The garage, meanwhile, is an addition to the house. So they're proposing to build this little addition over here, which would provide a connection to the garage. And then the stairs would be over here, 3 feet off the side property line. So for the garage, there's a special exception to extend the non-conforming front setback over, to allow that garage in the location that is proposed. And then there's a setback variance to allow the garage to come within 3 feet of the side property line. The one thing I'll point out is that the garage is another foot further back than the previous proposal. And then I guess factoring in the front porch addition to the house, it becomes quite a bit further back from the front of the house. So just something to consider. But I know that the applicant is hoping that they can preserve the views that they have of their yard from the kitchen inside here, where they have windows. So that was one reason that he was reluctant to push the garage back. And moving on, these are photographs of the existing house. You see the driveway leading into the side yard. A close-up view of the proposal, the first floor plan. This would be the second floor plan. So the garage has an upstairs to it, an additional living space, which is allowed. And the elevation from the front street.
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Batchelor, could you go back? The proposals for a flat roof on the garage?
No, you'll see in the side view that it's a gable roof,
Okay.
modified.
Oh, I see. Okay, I was looking at it wrong.
Yeah. So that's just the front elevation. And then the side elevation, you see, so this would be the front of the garage right here. Is that right? Let me go back. The applicant's on the call, so he can, yeah. So the stairs lead down to the front. So yes, this is the front of the garage, front side over here. And so you see it's a sort of a modified gable appearance. 2 stories in the back. I guess it's 1 story in the front view with that large dormer. And the applicant has secured support from the adjacent neighbors, 238, 227 St. Margaret, and 229 Gordon Street. So that includes all the applicant slides. I do think that with the porch addition, I'll go back to the elevation. With this addition being added to the front of the house, I guess the garage being a little bit further back from the front edge of that porch begins to minimize the appearance of that relative to the house. But I guess the board can make its decision about whether it feels like they've met the special exception test to allow this extension of the non-conforming front setback, to allow that garage in that location, keeping in mind, of course, that there's no light and air impact, I don't think, from that setback necessarily. But there would be, you should consider also the impact on the aesthetic character of the barns. I believe that's part of the special exception test. So that should be considered in your deliberations and decision tonight. And with that, I will end my presentation.
What
Mr.
is the
Baxter,
city's position?
Well, we had recommended approval before. I think those comments that the board members had last time were very valid, and I did talk to the applicant about trying to push the garage back a few feet. He's reluctant to do that. The other thing is that it would not work with the connection point being right here that he's proposed. So if the garage was to shift further back, then he would have an issue there as well. So I think I'm willing to stick with a recommendation in favor.
City recommends approval. Ms. Grash, you had a question for Mr. Batchelder?
yeah, I apologize. I am just wondering what the square footage is of the addition.
I don't know offhand what that is, proposed coverage. But the applicant, who is an architect, also could potentially, I hope, answer that question.
Has it
It's in
been,
the little box on the bottom right. Can y'all read the little box on the bottom right?
It looks like the new first floor is 655 square feet and new second is 500. So I guess that would be 1155. New total 1156.
Thank you.
Yeah.
has it been before the BAR yet?
This does not go through the BAR. It's not within their jurisdiction.
Okay.
They have review authority over demolitions and major alterations of structures up in this part of the city that are 50 years or more old, but I don't believe would have any review over the architecture that's being proposed for the addition.
Ms. Ashby, is there anyone present in opposition to the application?
No, Mr. Robinson, there is no opposition.
Mr. Batchel, I believe you showed a letter from the occupant of 238 St. Margaret who said they had no opposition to this.
We'll go back to that Oops. Yes, upper left.
And that's the most affected neighbor, is it not?
Well, 234, I think, would be the most affected. That would be, oops,
Going the other way. Oh, okay.
well, I think that would be this neighbor right here. They're the most affected with this addition, and it seemed like the applicant was saying that they had spoken to that neighbor before. But anyway, I'm sure he's on the call. We can perhaps ask him to answer those questions.
Does the board have any questions for the applicant?
I have a couple questions, at least one question I can think of that I'd like to ask the applicant.
Would the applicant please be sworn in?
Can you promote James Bishop to be a panelist? Okay.
Mr. Bishop?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
would you allow Mr. Batchelor to swear you in, please?
Yes, sir.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Mr. Bishop, I believe the board has a question or two for you, please.
Mr. Bishop, this is John Bennett. I really appreciate, I think, your hard work to try and address our comments from the last meeting. And I think the work you've done is an improvement, both from the distance from the front of the property, but also from the scale of the addition. It's much lower, and I think that really helps. My only question is related to the stair on the east side. Is it enclosed under the stair?
Under the stairs enclosed, correct.
Okay. Was there
you
any way to configure that stair either internally or on the rear, minimizing the impact on the setback?
The problem is trying to get it within the hip of the roof, because currently we have a gable there. And the other issue that we had too is if we enclosed it, I just felt like enclosing it on the east property just made it just feel even, like I was taking up even more space. So I felt like trying to keep an open stair just, gives a little bit, at least a feel that it's less than, or a bigger setback than it actually is.
Mr. Bishop, did you contact the owner of 234 St. Margaret?
I have several times. So the house was recently sold, and they're in the middle of flipping it. So he said that I was trying to get a letter from him, but he didn't seem to have too many concerns on it.
Any other questions for Mr. Bishop?
So,
I'm
sorry, go ahead, Ally.
I was just going to ask about the neighborhood association. Did you speak to them, and did they?
I did, and I thought that Patar sent in a letter back in December. But they were in
You have a
support of
record
it.
of that, Mr. Batchelor?
Penny, are you able to look in our file back then? From that December meeting, December 21st meeting? I don't remember. I don't want to.
I know that they typically send it to you and not to me. But I know that we had a neighborhood meeting, and they were in support of it.
I will look.
Thank you.
See. Oh, I'll let Penny do it.
May I clarify one thing while she's looking? Mr. Bishop, are you saying 234 St. Margaret is actually listed for sale now?
No, they're in the middle of flipping it right now. So it's being fully renovated. They're adding an addition to the rear, dormers on the front. So it's under construction right now. But from what I understand from the owner, he said that he bought the property to flip it.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I just was curious as what was on the second floor. Could I just see the exterior elevation again?
Front, side?
That's good, that's good. Okay.
Okay.
So is that just like a living area?
Correct. Yeah.
Kitchen.
So my parents are getting pretty old, so they come to visit quite a lot. So really kind of building this space for them to have whenever they come visit is the main goal of this. And then my kids, I've got 2 kids, so just kind of having overflow space is always helpful.
The only way to access that second floor is through the exterior stair?
Correct. And I try to push the stair back as well, so it's not right up on the front property line as well. Again, just trying to reduce the impact of that.
Will you please repeat why you said you didn't include the stairs on the interior?
So including the stairs on the interior would have just made this addition larger. And so I just felt that the architecture of that just was a little bit heavier and a little bit more asymmetrical. So I wanted to give the illusion and feel more open on that property setback. So even though it's a 3-foot setback from the stair, from the front of the property, it's actually almost 7 because of the front of the stair setback and then the actual setback. So it just feels a little bit more open. And then setting that stair back again just gives the illusion that it's a larger setback than it actually is.
Mr. Batchelder, just to confirm that there was not a communication from the neighborhood association for this application.
Thank you, Penny.
I'm a little
Apologize.
concerned about that exterior stair. I guess I don't really understand why the stair couldn't be inside. And I think that's adding to of course, I didn't see the initial design from the 21st, so.
Yeah, the
Is
initial
that
design.
also where
This,
the initial design also had the stair on the side and the
Mhm.
back?
no, it was part of this is the floor plan, site plan with the first floor shown. So it was back here,
Mhm.
the back of the
Gotcha.
garage.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Bishop? We'll close the public hearing portion of the meeting and call for a motion or any questions the board might have.
I'll start. I'm still concerned about it's it impacting the aesthetic character. It's awfully large. It just seems like the stairs could be placed on the interior, or I don't know. I'm still concerned I still have the same concerns that I had last time when we voted about the impact on the aesthetic character. And it just seems very large to me.
I would echo the sentiments. It seems to me that the stair would be much better suited on the rear or internal, even if that meant extending to the rear slightly. I think that would prevent a lot of the impact on the historic character of the neighborhood by doing such.
I agree.
And I would also just like to add, I would also like to hear from the neighborhood association if that's possible.
I find it rather unusual that the neighborhood association did not weigh in. They get notice of the meetings and the items on the agenda. It is rather unusual. But Mr. Bishop says that he did present it to them. It's time to call for a motion.
Well, is it possible to place a motion upon the floor that that would be based upon what the neighborhood association would have to say? I mean, since we're all in doubt about that.
I don't know whether that would take the form of a proper motion, Mr. John. If, something like that would be more of a deferral.
Yeah, that's what I'm implying. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, you can give it a try if that's what you would like.
I move that we would defer a decision tonight until hearing from the neighborhood association.
Is there a second to that?
I will second that motion.
Any comments on the motion and second?
I'm
So,
sorry.
go ahead,
I
go
wanted
ahead, Ally.
I'm sorry, I know I keep jumping in. I'm concerned about that only because of, if the stairs situation and still, then it doesn't really address that. If the neighborhood, if we're, deferring it so that the neighborhood, I want to hear from the neighborhood association, definitely, but I'm concerned still about the stairs. I don't know if it really addresses that. And I'd like to hear from the other board members because I may just be totally off on what I'm saying. So,
Ms. Grass, I think if the deferral is not contingent, is not placing a contingency on anything, it's just a deferral to hear what they have to say. And if it comes back to the board is going to respond to the entire application.
okay. I knew that there wouldn't be a contingency placed on it. I'm just expressing my concern still about that.
Ms. Richards, did you have a comment?
Well, I just had a question. So if the neighborhood association, for example, came back and said they were in whatever their position, in favor or against, we still have the same opportunity to decide that the stairs and the scale is not right, but we've at least heard what the neighborhood association says.
We're not bound by anything they say or do.
Okay.
I would just like to say, I think we ought to try to do our best to give Mr. Bishop specific feedback so he'll know when he comes back again. And I'm sympathetic to the several questions about whether there's any way to put the stairs anywhere else. But the mention of the scale is a second separate item that is something. If we can make a suggestion to him, I think we owe it to him. I think the scale is pushing it, but I would, if the stairs were rectified, I would not be bothered by the scale. He's made an effort to have the roof peak match the location, the height of the original house, not the peak, but the whatever you call where the attic would start. And it's got the proportions as well as can be managed, I think, between the two buildings. It's my personal take. It is large. It almost, the appearance from the street is it almost doubles the size of the improvement on the property. But if the neighborhood association, the neighbors don't object and the stairs are addressed, it would not bother me personally.
Does anyone
Mr.
else have any comments?
Mr. John, would you consider an amendment to your motion to consider both the position of to defer so that we can consider the position of the neighborhood association, as well as to allow the applicant to restudy or reconsider the position of the stair?
Absolutely.
The motion has been amended as this was who did the second?
I did.
And you go along with that, Mr. Bennett?
I do.
All right, I think we've given Mr. Bishop something to work with. There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Jadon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Good luck to you, Mr. Bishop, and call on city staff if you have any further questions.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. That ends the meeting. Thank you all once again.
Thank you. I have one
Thank you.
question, just for Lee or Penny. The email that Scott sent, it just had the meetings as the first Tuesday of every month.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we have to set the Zoom. And Scott, if you're there, can you explain?
Is
Because
that was,
you can
was
explain
that
better
just
than
some?
I can.
Oh, okay. So we are still meeting our normal first and third Tuesday.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
That's
just
all.
the way